Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service. I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, hazardous weather graphic, a winter weather advisory up here on the Arctic coast for snow, blowing snow, and that's out from midnight tonight until 3 p.m. Monday. So quite an extended period of that is expected up there. And the lower Yukon River Valley area here, including Grayling and northeastward there. Anyway, that's a dense fog advisory that was out for much of today and is due to expire early this evening, I think by 9 p.m. And in the central interior here, we've got snow advisories out, and that extends into the Fort Yukon area and the Yukon Flats, southward to Tanana, and across Denali Park into the Susitna Valley. Snow advisory is out for those areas for the Susitna Valley. That's going to be mostly tonight into early tomorrow and tomorrow afternoon, and also tonight and tomorrow for the central interior. And then Bristol Bay, snow advisory out, or winter weather advisory for snow and blowing snow, anywhere from 2 to maybe 5 inches falling in all of those areas. On satellite imagery today, you can see clouds pushing northeastward here, the frontal boundary right through here, pushing into the panhandle, quite weakened from what it was, spreading just clouds across the central and southern southeast coast today. And the rain back from, the northern panhandle had some very light rain and snow, depending on your elevation, time of day, and latitude here, but amounts are generally less than 1 or 2/100ths of an inch. But it increased dramatically over toward Yakutat, where they picked up a 12-hour amount of just under an inch of precipitation, about 1/3 to 1/2 inch falling along the North Gulf Coast and the Kenai Peninsula. Liquid water equivalent, both the peninsula and the Susitna Valley, anywhere from 1/4 to 1/3 of an inch of precipitation. And again, some of that falling is snow there in the Susitna Valley. Not so much in the Copper River Basin, and just areas of light precipitation here up over the northern interior areas there. And it looks like clearing back here to the southwest with higher pressure building in, or there was some clearing, drier and light wind conditions, and then a system pulling up that's south of the eastern Aleutians that spread some light rain northward into the Unalaska and Nikolsky back to about Atka areas today, but only about 10 to 15/100ths of an inch of precipitation. And that system sliding off to the northeast here, already spreading clouds into Kodiak Island. Cold air coming out of the Russian Far East is going to follow this system in behind. That whole cold air mass is going to shift eastward and come into the interior and finally bring a chance of snow to the southern Alaska area. And rolling that one more time, you can see the separation here, a little bit of a break between this system and the next one coming in. And today we had that weak low here in the Gulf of Alaska, keeping it wet on the North Gulf Coast, and this front really washed out from what it had been. And then trough not producing any weather, dry conditions, Kodiak Island. This system spreading rain as far north as the Pribilofs, light rain, drizzle, fog, that type of thing as far north as St. Paul, St. George, and eastern Aleutians seeing some light rain, and St. Lawrence Island, light snow, just making it onto the south coast at mid-afternoon, and an area of snow. Some areas could have seen anywhere from 2 to 4 inches during the day today, depending on where you were, but if you head east or west, amounts were much lighter, and it was cut off for the North Slope and the Arctic coast. But tonight, Arctic front right along the Brooks Range there. Look for a band of snow along that boundary, mostly the south, a little bit to the north of it. And then farther to the south, pretty fair, diminishing isolated flurries or snow showers here along the Alaska Range mainly, possibly the Yukon lower Yukon River Valley, maybe the Seward Peninsula. This system, the significant feature on the chart here, spreading rain along the Alaska Peninsula into Kodiak Island. The wind field will stay to the south of the land areas there, and colder air pushing into the Aleutians. So we're looking at mostly snow showers or snow there for the Bering Sea and a mixture of for the Aleutians. And looks like a chance of rain will spread in over the central and southern southeast coast during the night tonight. And then for tomorrow, that next system pushes up to the northeast here from the Alaska Peninsula, spreads moderate amounts of rain into the North Gulf Coast, especially the east side there, down into the northern Panhandle. So it looks pretty wet tomorrow for the southeast coast, and gale force winds in advance of this frontal system. Mixture of rain or snow to just snow that'll extend up across the mid-Tanana Valley areas, maybe into the 40-mile country, and then just a chance of showers over toward Eagle, clearing out kind of a weak area of high pressure, so cooler temperatures here in the central interior from the north slope, and that band of snow right along the Arctic coast. Weak trough, snow showers here approaching the southwest coast, hitting Nunivak Island, St. Lawrence Island. More snow out there with that trough to the Aleutians. Well, that low stays parked in the Prince William Sound area, say around Montague Island for a couple of days, and that's going to help draw the cold air in, and that position looks pretty good for some snow. Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, Manusco-Susitna Valleys, here right on down to the sea level for the entire Kenai Peninsula, as well as the North Gulf Coast. Northern Panhandle front pushes in, snow in the north, rain or snow mix here in the central areas, extreme south, mostly rain. Another system pushing more snow actually into Adak and Atka. Lows tonight, single numbers here. Northern interior, back down to the south, otherwise south of the Alaska Range, 20s to mid-30s, followed by highs tomorrow in the upper 30s to lower 40s, near 40 there for the North Gulf Coast, lower to mid-40s for the Alaska Peninsula, and mid-30s for the Pribilofs, followed by lows.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First flying weather graphic here for Sunday morning. A lot of good VFR out here over the Bering Sea. A little bit of marginal stuff for the far western Aleutians. Otherwise, IFR here, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, across Kodiak Island and the southern coast here into the northern Panhandle. Marginal VFR, central, southern, southeast coast. Areas of IFR over the central interior all the way up to the north slope and Arctic coast. And for the afternoon, got a band of IFR now up along the Arctic coast, marginal over the north slope. Mostly IFR west and east of the state, and even into the central interior here, southward into south central Alaska. A lot of IFR, North Gulf Coast, Gulf of Alaska, solid IFR in the forecast for the entire Panhandle, and some VFR now for Bristol Bay, and also Central Bering Sea, Pribilof Islands, VFR, with marginal VFR with some VFR also over the Aleutians. And for the Monday morning time frame, looks like we got VFR breaking or pushing northward into western Cook Inlet, but with the snow, IFR here for northern Cook Inlet into the Manusca Valley, Susitna Valley, and North Gulf Coast, most of the Copper River Basin. In fact, IFR up the east side here to the Arctic coast, and some more IFR out here from the northwest coast, across the Seward Peninsula into the Yukon Delta, northern Kuskokwim Valley. Another band IFR with a disturbance here approaching Nunivak Island and swinging across the Pribilofs in the morning. And for the afternoon, replaced by VFR and then marginal VFR in surges here coming across the Bering Sea and the central Aleutians. VFR, Kodiak Island, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, lots of IFR here from the coast range northward across all the eastern interior, expanding in the central interior. And by the time you get up to the Brooks Range, on out to the north slopes, just about the whole area up there, some more IFR here, Seward Peninsula into the Yukon Delta, and marginal VFR to IFR for the Panhandle. Passes tomorrow, pretty good for Anatufik and Adigan. Both look VFR, maybe in ceilings visibility is unlimited. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR trending toward IFR, some moisture coming in from the east and southeast, and rainy starting out VFR, becoming IFR in the latter part of the afternoon. Windy, occasionally IFR the entire day, but not solid IFR, but kind of off and on. And for Isabel, IFR. Mentasta looks marginal. And Tanita, VFR becoming IFR. and for Portage, IFR, and Chilkoot and White, IFR. Taking a look at the freezing levels here, strong jet here, about 140 knots out of the southwest due to this thermal gradient we have with freezing levels, or shown up by the freezing level lines, 2,000 feet right here across northern Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, and then 8,000 feet just south of Kodiak and the Alaska Peninsula. And 2,000 feet extends into the northern panhandle. We've got the surface out here over the Bering Sea still by tomorrow morning all the way up to St. Lawrence Island. And for icing, just some scattered areas of light to possibly isolated moderate rime or mixed icing here. Southern Bering Sea skirting the Aleutians. Nothing really that significant. The most significant will be here with that disturbance pushing up to the North Gulf Coast into the panhandle. This batch staying off the coast through tomorrow afternoon. And up here along the north, though, probably midday or so, this will be making landfall. That's the considerable moderate area rime icing, above about 5,000 feet or so, otherwise light to isolated moderate rime icing, Kodiak Island, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, up into the Susitna Valley, Western Alaska Range, Denali Park area. And for the jet stream, we've got this low coming into the southwest interior, much colder air with it. And so once this pushes through, it looks like it'll bring snow across southern Alaska as it pushes through starting tomorrow into Monday morning. It'll stay cold for at least a couple of days after that. And 9,000 foot wind flow. We've got low pressure up into the Barren Islands at this elevation. Pretty good winds around that, 40 knots out of the south. Northwest, 40 to 50 knots coming across the Alaska Peninsula, mainly south of Kodiak, and 20 to 30 into the Panhandle, 25 to 35 knot winds across the Aleutians. Easterlies on the Arctic coast, 30 to 35 knots. And as far as turbulence goes, light to ice, or considerable moderate chop likely here, southwest interior, southwest Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, western Aleutians, North Gulf Coast, and the northern Panhandle.
You guys got everything tied down back there? Yeah. Yep. We're going through the lee of St. Elias, so there might be some turbulence.
Fasten seatbelt sign on.
Well, who am I to tell you what to do?
There are tens of thousands of glaciers in Alaska. Some stunning cliffhangers, others wide glaciers that come down to meet the ocean tides. Some, like this one we flew over in August, are easily visible from low Earth orbit and are mesmerizing from 1,000 feet above, and have trees growing on top of their soil-laden boundaries. Those glaciers, although they represent only a fraction of the world's ice, are contributing much more than their share to sea level rise. Chris Larson and his colleagues have repeatedly measured 220 of them in a small single-engine otter, measuring their height with lasers and their depth with radar, and watching them change from season to season and year to year. But Alaskan glaciers are also different. We're only just figuring out how they all behave. Data from flights like these, part of NASA's Operation Icebridge, can help fill the gaps. Chris and radar specialist Martine Trufer are both from the University of Alaska Fairbanks and both seasoned Alaskan pilots. But they rely on their good friend and legendary bush pilot Paul Kloss and his 35,000 hours in the cockpit to fly the incredibly demanding flight lines the mission requires.
And does it help you guys being pilots too?
I would like to think so, but watching Paul fly and seeing what he does, it's kind of like trying to learn quantum mechanics in kindergarten.
You know, I can fly my airplane around, but just seeing what Paul does in this extremely challenging environment in the mountains while trying to follow a specific flight line at a specific altitude above ground, negotiating winds, topography, maybe occasional low-level clouds that you have to get around, and just managing all that is just several levels above what I could do as a pilot.
Well, I think the first time I came here to this park, I was probably 4 years old with my father. I've been blessed to be able to fly in lots of places in the world, all over the place actually, almost every continent. I guess I'm always looking for some place that might be better than this, but I haven't found it.
Paul's plane is about 60 years old and is the first single-engine Otter ever retrofitted with a 1,000 horsepower engine, which makes takeoffs feel effortless and gives Paul the ability to negotiate wild terrain, which he certainly did during the first 2 incredible science flights of this campaign. And with sunny skies and relatively calm air, we covered 3 vastly different pieces of ice. While Paul fueled up the plane, Chris gave us a preview of the day's science and scenery.
So it has one of the greatest coastal reliefs anywhere in the world. So it's between the ocean and the summit of Mount St. Elias, which is 18,008 feet high. It's less than 10 miles. There's a stupendous amount of mountain right off the ocean. It's hard to beat it anywhere in the world. It might be the prettiest for me. It's absolutely stunning. From here in McCarthy, we'll cross one of the bigger precipitation gradients in Alaska too. Here it's about 10 inches of precipitation a year, and we'll go over to an area where it's on the order of 200 inches per year. So it's from one of the driest parts of Alaska to one of the wettest parts of Alaska in about 45 minutes flight time.
Whoa, that's pretty good.
That's awesome. You want to do Tyndall next?
Sure, where you want?
If the winds are calm now, might as well grab it.
First, we came to the rugged landscape of Icy Bay, which not that long ago wasn't a bay at all. It was filled with ice. Tidewater glaciers in this region can make dramatic advances and retreats as they feed on high rates of snowfall and then retreat as they're melted by warm ocean waters. Like the Tyndall Glacier seen here, most of these glaciers have retreated dramatically over the last 100 years. But nearby Yahtzee Glacier, after years of retreat, is currently the most rapidly advancing glacier in Alaska. Overall, though, the Icebridge Alaska surveys, from the Denali region in the north to the Juneau ice field in the southeast, have documented pretty substantial thinning of glacial ice. Areas seen here in orange and red show between about 10 and 15 feet of thinning per year.
1200.
It's a nice waterfall up there from the hanging ice.
When we very first started profiling this, Paul, this gravel fan in the one in the valley next to it didn't exist.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
this was
look at all the good landing spots here.
Yeah,
There's no place to land here before.
no, it was deep water.
After covering several of Icy Bay's glaciers, given that it was time for lunch, just like that, we landed in this unforgettable spot. Flying eastward, leaving Icy Bay behind, we came to the mighty Malaspina, one of the Earth's great examples of a Piedmont glacier that spills out like pancake batter onto a broad plain as it approaches the sea. It surges at uneven intervals, creating dramatic patterns on its surface as it distorts the moraines of rock and soil borne along by the glacier. The Malaspina is less dynamic than the Yahtzee and is only melting at about the average rate for Alaska, but that could change quickly.
It has the potential for being one of the bigger geographic evolutions in Alaska. Certainly My son will be able to witness some big geography changes there. There's potential for it being connected with the ocean through some narrow lagoons, estuaries, which would take a little bit of coastal erosion, but it's not too hard to imagine that where the Malaspina Glacier is now could become a large bay.
The data that Martine's radar provides could reveal how vulnerable the Malaspina is to melting by the nearby ocean. Here we see the radar returns from the surface of the glacier, and here is something that Chris's lasers can't see, the rocky bed of the glacier, giving us both clues as to what's happening under the ice, as well as a measurement of its thickness. Finally, we came to the Yakutat ice field, 300 square miles of absolutely doomed ice perched high in the mountains. Researchers even debate how this ice field came to be at all, since in its current configuration, it's hard to imagine how it could capture enough snow to form glacial ice. And so, even if the Arctic weren't warming faster than the rest of the planet, this area would be likely to melt within a century or two. But with many other glaciers, it's easier to see the connection between a warming planet and ice loss. Thanks to data from IceBridge and other surveys, we now have a good estimate of the current rate of loss from Alaskan glaciers, 75 gigatons a year. While airborne observations over Alaskan glaciers have provided a rich record of change in the area, those efforts are now augmented by NASA's newest ice measuring tool, ICESat-2. With 6 laser beams of its own, and orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes, the satellite will carry on the record of Alaskan change. For their part, Chris and his team will continue to do their surveys for at least the next 2 years, helping to validate the ICESat-2 data and make further detailed observations over the stunning glaciers of Alaska.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the coastal water forecast here. South coast, small craft advisory, south to southeast winds, 25 knots, and then south 30 knots on the north coast, and southeast 35 on the extreme north coast there, and south winds 25, gusts to 40 there for the Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay area, southeast 20-25 knots over the central southern inside waters. Outlook for Monday. Southeast winds 20 knots, south 20 for the central inside waters, small craft advisories for the northern inside waters at 25 knots. And for the coastline here, we've got west-southwest winds, southwest on the north coast, 30 knots here, out of the west on down, 25 knots along the coast of Prince of Wales Island. Cook Inlet, north 20 knots, northeast 25 for southern Cook Inlet, east winds at 25 for the Kamishak Bay area, southwest 25 to 30 knots for small craft advisories here for the Barren Islands, and then southerly gales for the eastern North Gulf Coast at 35, Prince William Sound east 30, seas 10 feet. And for Monday, southeast 15 for the Sound there with 4-foot seas, gale warnings for all of the North Gulf Coast, with southwest direction here in the east side and 21-foot seas. West, 45 knots for the western North Gulf Coast, and storm warnings out for the Barren Islands. Into Kamishak Bay, sustained 50-knot westerly winds and colder temperatures riding in on those winds. Seas running around 20 feet. Small craft advisory southern Cook Inlet, northwest 25 knots, and northwest at 10 for northern Cook Inlet. And for Bristol Bay, northeast winds, 30 knots tomorrow. Northwest across the Alaska Peninsula, 30 to 40 knots. West, 40 knots here from Sitkinak to Castle Cape. Turn southwest at 40 up the east side of Kodiak Island. And then on Wednesday, those winds turn westerly here at 40 knots with higher gusts out of the bays there in the eastern Fognak Kodiak Island area. West 30 knots and kind of gusty for Shelikof Strait. 30-knot westerlies from Sitkinak to Castle Cape. And for the Alaska Peninsula, west-southwest at 20 knots. Bristol Bay, west at 20 with 5-foot seas. And the western Aleutians, we've got westerly winds just about everywhere, all across the Aleutians here. Winds west 30 knots there west of Adak and Atka, west 25, a little bit lighter. And seas running 9 to 14 feet, 25-knot winds into Unalaska Island and Unmak Island. Probably northwest 25 there on the north side, or the Bering Sea side of Unalaska Island. And for Monday, west-southwesterlies, 25 to 30 knots for small craft advisories. Unalaska Island, Unmak Island, 30 to 35 knot winds out of the southwest with seas 15 to 20 feet. And west winds 30 to 35 knots over the western Aleutians, 35 knot gales from, say, Kiska in toward Adak. And for the southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, that's when the winds will be the strongest, northeast 30 knots, 8-foot seas. West 15 for the Pribilof, seas down to 10 feet. And kind of a variable wind pattern now for the northern Bering Sea, southeast 15 for St. Lawrence Island. And let's see, Monday, southwest 25, Pribilof, St. Matthew Island, south to southwest 15 to 20 along the southwest coast. Yukon Delta coast, or I'm sorry, St. Lawrence Island, southeast at 15, and the Arctic coast tomorrow, brisk wind advisories here on the east side, east winds 25 to 30 knots, small craft advisories central coast and west side for 30 knot easterlies. And taking a look at Monday, small craft advisories there. Seas and ice-free waters 5 feet for the central coast, east 25 on the west side, south of Point Lay to probably Cape Thompson. We're looking at 15 knot winds, even lighter from Cape Thompson to Wales. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, east-northeast at 20. For tonight, Arctic front here and a band of snow. With it, Brooks Range locally southward and lighter stuff up toward the Arctic coast, but gusty winds up there. Wind weather advisory out for the next couple of days starting tonight. And some isolated snow showers, Copper River Basin. Still kind of wet, but not too bad here. Not any heavy precipitation with this trough on the North Gulf Coast. And some light rain spreads over the Panhandle or showers. This system spreads rain into Kodiak tonight. It's going to take a track right up to the northeast. And tomorrow will be in this position, rain or snow south central Alaska. Rain into the Panhandle with winds, snowy in the Bering Sea. And this low pulls colder air in that comes in from the west for snow over southeast Alaska.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.